Distinguished guests from the National Assembly, Ambassador Cook, and other important guests. For those traveling from Seoul, welcome to Washington, and for those of you in Washington, welcome to the real world. It's good to see you. We're gathered here today to celebrate a very important milestone, the 10-year anniversary of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, or as we call it, KORUS. It's a welcome all of you here today to celebrate the milestone. KORUS, I think, without question, has helped facilitate bilateral trade and investment, and continues to deliver benefits to both business communities. And the Chamber is also pleased to host today's program with the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and very shortly from Executive Vice Chairman. I'd like to thank, at the outset, our sponsor, General Electric. Appreciate the support, and just a few words about the importance of the agreement to us in America and to the Chamber directly. Korea is a key ally and trading partner that shares our values of freedom, democracy, law, and human rights. And KORUS is the second largest U.S. FTA by trade flows after the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. KORUS, along with our security alliance, make up the two pillars of the bilateral relationship, and they are the linchpin for stability and security in the region. Trade agreements like KORUS and USMCA are hard-earned over years of careful deliberation among commercial allies. And once implemented, they form the solid foundation upon which our economy and national security ties are based. With KORUS as a bedrock of the economic relationship, the U.S. and Korean business communities have made significant contributions to the growth and strength of the bilateral relationship. Major U.S. firms have long been leading investors in Korea, while top South Korean firms have made significant investments and contributions to the growth and strength of the bilateral relationship. KORUS is supporting jobs and growth in both countries and helping increase two-way trade and investment. KORUS has expanded trade, investment, competition, and consumer choices in both economies, strengthened U.S. IPR protection in South Korea, and provided greater clarity and transparency on regulatory issues, including enabling U.S. companies to better serve Korean customers and vice versa. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, U.S.-Korea bilateral trade in goods has grown by 60%, from $100 to $160 billion in the last 10 years, representing 3.9% of total U.S. trade, up from 2.7%. It's the fastest growth among America's top 10 trading partners. And American exports of services rose by almost 30% between 2011 and 2016. U.S. exports of services to Korea were an estimated $17.8 billion in 2020. From 2011 to 2020, top U.S. export gains have occurred in telecom, computer, and information services. The stock of South Korean FDI, meanwhile, has reached $63.7 billion in 2020, more than triple the level in 2011. 2021 has certainly highlighted Korea's status as an integral part of the global economy and its important role in strengthening supply chains. Past years also shown that the resilience of the Korean economy and it's demonstrated the perseverance of the Korean people in overcoming moments of crisis. The Chamber sees great potential for bilateral cooperation in many areas, especially as we recover from COVID, including strengthening global health security, promoting digital trade, bolstering supply chain resiliency, and accelerating global energy transitions. These are some of the areas we highlighted in our recent recommendations to the administration on its efforts to develop an Indo-Pacific economic framework. And central to that framework, we believe, should be an enforceable digital trade agreement that builds on the high standards the U.S. has already negotiated in its agreements with Canada, Mexico, and Japan. It's imperative, from our perspective, given the recent rise of global trade barriers to U.S. digitally tradable services exports, to counter these foreign trade barriers and secure the benefits of digital trade, the U.S. must act quickly, we believe, to negotiate a high-standard digital trade agreement with key partners like Korea. Looking ahead, we'll continue to seek ways to advance U.S.-Korea public-private partnership in many areas. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy, and the Korean Commerce Chamber and Industry will be key partners in that endeavor. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to now welcome Tai Wu, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Korean Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to give brief opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Good morning. On behalf of KCCI and Korean Business, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to U.S. Chamber of Commerce for co-hosting today's event with KCCI. And I'd like to thank Honorable Ambassador Katherine Tai, His Excellency Minister Yeo Han-gu, and Senior Vice President Charles Freeman, and members of the Congress and the National Assembly for sharing precious time with us this morning. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is also a great honor for me to be part of this special event as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the chorus. It means a great deal that both countries have come together here today to share and celebrate this historic moment. Last November, in her first visit to Seoul, Ambassador Tai reaffirmed the achievement of chorus and expressed high hopes for the 10th anniversary. Ever since chorus came into force, the volume of trade between our two countries increased by almost $30 billion. And even in the time of global economic downturn, chorus has helped boost the trade volume by nearly 30%. The value of chorus lies not only in its economic benefits. Chorus is the first FTA signed between US and an Asian country, and it is a pioneering agreement that paved the way for establishing new trade norms. Now, in celebrating 10th anniversary, we should present new global trade rules to guide the next 10 years. While last decade of chorus made foundation of Korea-US economic alliance and the establishment of the free trade, I think next decade should focus on stable supply chain and introducing new rules such as digital transformation, climate change, labor, and environment. Korea has also taken great interest in Biden administration's Indo-Pacific economic framework. We look forward to the more flexible and inclusive framework and are eager to see what the framework brings to the region. Today's chorus 10th anniversary bears great significance as it represents our robust alliance in the years to come. In Korea, there is a saying that 10 years of time is capable of changing mountains and rivers. It tells us that 10 years is a long enough time for great changes to happen. I hope we could extend our 10 years of trade partnership to even more mutually beneficial way. KCCI, as the largest private organization representing the Korean businesses, will also continue its sincere and unyielding efforts to bring prosperity to the people of both countries. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
I neglected to mention at the outset in my opening remarks to recognize which is the leading voice for U.S.-Korea business cooperation, and I want to recognize specifically the Executive Director, S.B. Jalalian, in that context. Thank you again to everyone. We're very fortunate to have with us today Ambassador Katherine Tai to kick off the celebration. She's well known to everyone here. Ambassador Tai was sworn in as the 19th U.S. Trade Representative last year and has served as the President's Principal Trade Advisor, negotiator, and spokesperson on U.S. trade policy. Ambassador Tai previously served as Chief Trade Counsel and Trade Subcommittee Staff Director for the House Ways and Means Committee in Congress, where she played, I think we can all agree, a pivotal role in shaping U.S. trade law, negotiation strategies, and trade agreements, including the hard-won renegotiated U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. She's an experienced WTO litigator. She previously developed and tried cases for the Office of USTR, eventually becoming Chief Counsel for China Trade Enforcement. Before I turn it over to you, I'd like to thank you for all the support you and your team have provided to the U.S. business community. So thanks very much. We appreciate your leadership and look forward to the continued partnership. Ambassador Katherine Tai.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. Thank you, Charles, for that very kind introduction. And I want to begin by thanking the Chamber of Commerce, the U.S.-Korea Business Council, and the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry for putting together this event. I want to thank Minister Yo for being here as well. You've been a strong, dedicated partner and a very, very good friend. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the members of Korea's National Assembly, whom I just met, who are here today, and also the presence of my good friend, mentor, and one of my favorite human beings in the entire world, Ambassador Ron Kirk, on whose watch the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement saw passage and entry into force. It's wonderful to see you. Today we mark the 10-year anniversary of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, an agreement that has survived a number of significant adjustments before its passage by the U.S. Congress and a renegotiation as recently as 2018. KORUS, as it is often called, is a manifestation of the resilience in our bilateral economic relationship and the ability of our two nations to confront challenges head-on. Trade agreements, as I've often said, are not trophies to be put on the shelf and admired. They are living arrangements that require constant tending and continued attention in order to remain relevant and responsive to the evolving dynamics in our relationship and the world economy. Over the last decade, the value of the goods and services we have exported to Korea has grown by over 17% to nearly $70 billion. Along with the successes of this agreement, and there are many, we have also grappled with disappointments and challenges along the way in its implementation. Last year, the United States exported $3.2 billion worth of American-made cars and trucks to Korea, making Korea our fifth largest export market for automobiles. And while this is notable progress, we do have much further to go, and we will continue to focus on expanding opportunities for U.S. autos exports to Korea. We must also remain vigilant in our government-to-government cooperation to overcome barriers that undermine the quality and the quantity of those opportunities. U.S. agricultural exports to Korea reached $9.4 billion in 2021, a record amount that has grown by nearly 35% compared to a decade ago, making Korea the fifth largest export destination for U.S. agriculture also. And last year, Korea became the #1 destination for U.S. beef and beef products by volume and value, amounting to $2.38 billion, also a record. I will say that having visited Korea and Minister Yo last November, and having been treated to many delicious Korean meals, I have to say that I fully appreciate now, I think, the importance of beef in the Korean diet. I may have come home with my pants a lot tighter than when I went to Korea. Despite these successes, there is still room to grow the market in Korea for U.S. agricultural products, including more beef, but also creating a regulatory environment that facilitates access to agricultural biotechnologies. Innovation in agricultural production will be critical to helping farmers adapt to climate change, and we look forward to working with Korea in its capacity as a global powerhouse of scientific and technological innovation. Over the last 10 years, the agreement has strengthened the investment ties between our two countries. Tomorrow, Minister Yo and I head to Michigan to tour SK Siltron CSS, a South Korean-based semiconductor wafer manufacturer with a large facility in Auburn, about 120 miles north of Detroit. Last year, SK Siltron announced a 3-year plan to invest $300 million in Bay County, Michigan. They will double the number of people they employ in the state, creating good-paying jobs, and will provide manufacturing and R&D capabilities of advanced materials for electric vehicles. When President Moon visited the White House in early 2021, President Biden said, "The Republic of Korea and the United States are both nations built on innovation, and we must both meet the challenges facing us today and look to what is possible for tomorrow." This partnership between our two countries is an excellent example of how we can harness the innovation and talent of our citizens to create a cleaner, more sustainable economy while also creating good-paying jobs. The logic underlying our trade agreements is that trade is the tide that lifts boats in both of our economies. For example, when we ship beef, soybeans, and fruit to Busan, it helps farmers in Iowa, California, and Nebraska. Meanwhile, Korean families and communities benefit when their products come to the United States. While that is the logic that underlies our trade agreements, despite the many positive developments over the last decade, we must also be clear-eyed about the fact that benefits of trade and trade agreements more generally, including benefits from the promises of KORUS, have not been evenly distributed throughout our communities or sectors of our economy. And the last 2 years of the pandemic have highlighted some of the vast inequities that persist and are at risk of getting worse around the globe. We have also seen, in these years, a rise in new technologies that have broken down barriers and enhanced connections around the world, but have also created serious challenges like the spread of disinformation and erosion of personal privacy. And in recent years, certain non-market economies and countries have doubled down on their state-centered economic systems that create an uneven playing field and prevent American and Korean businesses and workers from competing fairly. So, as we look to the next 10 years of KORUS, we must place a greater emphasis on the day-to-day needs and experiences of our citizens, ensure that our policies facilitate that race to the top, and jointly prepare for the challenges of the next decade. I am hopeful that we can accomplish these goals because our two countries are continuously working to ensure that KORUS remains relevant. In November, when I visited Seoul and co-chaired the joint committee meeting of the KORUS agreement with Minister Yo, I found around me in Seoul an incredible dynamism. And in addition to the routine work, the discussions that we had to resolve trade irritants and ensuring both sides are meeting their commitments under the agreement, Minister Yo and I agreed to intensify a future-oriented approach to our economic relationship to harness this dynamism. Specifically, we agreed to enhance channels of communication to effectively address emerging trade-related issues in areas such as supply chain challenges, emerging technologies, the digital ecosystem, and trade facilitation, with the intention of deepening cooperation to enable common approaches and responses to challenges facing global trade. We also affirmed the importance of labor and environmental issues in trade and the need for advanced cooperation between our economies in these areas. Advancing these priorities through KORUS is not only important to the future of our bilateral relationship, but also to the broader region, as many of these priorities are at the heart of the Indo-Pacific economic framework that we are developing. We look forward also to working with the new Yoon administration, and we believe me that Korea is well positioned to play a leading role in advancing this framework. The strongest impression that my trip to Seoul made on me is that the spirit of strength, resilience, and entrepreneurialism in the Korean people reminds me in every way of the same spirit in the American people. Working together, we can bring about a new global economy that is built for resilience, sustainability, inclusion, and competition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Katherine Tai, for your insight and thoughtful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce Trade Minister Yeo Han-gu. Minister Yeo has been supporting Korean business and industry for many years and is responsible for concluding many important FTAs, including RCEP and many others. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Good morning. Thank you, Vice Chairman Wu, Vice Chairman Charles, and also U.S. Korea Business Council. It's great to be back in Washington for a joyful event, especially amid such tumultuous events across the Atlantic. Let me first thank both Korean Chamber and the U.S. Chamber for hosting this meaningful anniversary. We have before us a distinguished group of guests, including Honorable Chairman Amy Berra, I believe virtually of the House, and the Honorable Chairman Lee Ha-kyung, and Honorable members Kang Hoon-sik, Han Moo-kyung of the Korean National Assembly's Committee on Trade, Industry and Energy. Let me start off by sharing a life story of my own Korea, the Chorus FTA. I still vividly remember the first day of my arrival in D.C. as commercial attaché on the Friday before Labor Day weekend in 2017. After reporting to work at the embassy upon my arrival, I was enjoying a nice dinner in Korean the restaurant in Anandale, and all of a sudden I saw the CNN breaking news on the screen that Chorus FTA will be terminated in a few days. So that was the day one to me in DC. My tenure started with Big Bang, a big special welcome to the Beltway moment, if you will. And following the holiday weekend, I hit the hill for urgent help and recruit allies, and one of the first to meet me was my now counterpart and good friend, Katherine Tai. So she was instrumental in helping save the Chorus FTA from a fate I cannot imagine. And while Chorus reaching this milestone has many unsung heroes, she is certainly one of them. So thank you. So Katherine, I was told that in the West, an appropriate 10th anniversary gift is something made of aluminum. So maybe it's a good time to resolve our 2-3 issues. Ladies and gentlemen, if I were to use a metaphor in this era of the pandemic, the Chorus FTA was a booster shot for the Korea-US trade and investment. No doubt strengthening our alliance that has served as a linchpin for peace, security, and prosperity in our region. In short, it has been a big win-win accomplishment in itself for both countries, particularly in 3 aspects. First, on trade. Our bilateral trade volume has grown by 70%, from $100 billion right before the Chorus FTA to $170 billion by 2021. I must also note that our bilateral trade flows expanded by about a quarter over the past 2 years during the pandemic, despite the slowdown in the overall trade flow. U.S. export to Korea has been a boon. We see Korea is second largest purchaser of U.S. LNG. American beef has maintained the largest market share in Korea's import beef market since 2017. And Korean consumers are now able to enjoy quality wines, cherries, oranges from the United States at much more affordable prices. Korean consumers' appetite for Korean cars is only growing, with Tesla and other household names dotting the street of Seoul. With auto imports from the US multiplying manifold from $710 million before the Chorus FTA to $3.74 billion in 2021, overtaking Japan as number 2 auto importer following European Union. Trade has also opened doors to people-to-people exchanges, deepening with a 60% increase in travel from 2.12 million travelers before the Chorus FTA to 3.4 million in 2019. Some stay to teach and work. I'm always stunned to see so many Americans speaking fluent Korean, with a few making a career out of it as local celebrities. While Korean soft power has received the lion's share of the attention, it is hard to ignore our cultural exchanges have outperformed recently with the Academy Award winning movie Parasite, and an Oscar to the lead actress to Minari, and the blockbuster Netflix show Squid Games, and then Korean music groups like BTS, Blackpink, mirroring household American cultural icons that my generation grew open on. The second aspect to be proud of is the investment. Korean investment in the United States created nearly 90,000 quality local jobs through 2021, making substantial contribution to job creation effort. Hyundai and Kia helped transform Alabama and Georgia to become new auto manufacturing powerhouse, as did Samsung's investment in its semiconductor manufacturing in Texas, now the center of America's advanced manufacturing supply chain. Local manufacturing activities were bolstered in Tennessee and Louisiana after LG Electronics, Hankook Tire, and Lotte opened their factories to produce washers, tires, and petrochemicals. Likewise, in Michigan, LG Energy Solutions' investment in batteries is ushering in a new golden age of electric vehicles for the Motor City. I'm proud to say that Korea accounts for 11 out of 14 battery manufacturing facilities to be built in the United States by 2025, comprising 70% of capacity being built. Naturally, Korea and the United States have become so interconnected and indispensable partners in critical supply chain, such as semiconductors, batteries, electric vehicles, and energy. This is also a two-way street. US companies have also been expanding investment in Korea over the same decade. Some of the American companies present here today have been long-term partners in these efforts. GM being the largest foreign investor in Korea, and 3M producing life-saving personal protection equipment, vital to keeping everyone safe during the global pandemic. On biohealth, last year our two leaders agreed to establish Chorus Global Vaccine Partnership, combining competitive advantage each has to save the world from the pandemic. US is a world leader in innovative biotechnology, and Korea has world's second largest biopharma production capacity. Since then, life-saving Moderna vaccines with mRNA technology is being manufactured in Korea to be supplied around the world, and a leading US biopharma company, Cytiva, has done the same through its investment in Korea for vaccine raw material production. In closing, it is high time to plan ahead the future of Chorus FTA for the next 10 years. With a persisting uncertainties from COVID, global supply chain disruption, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and big competition in the Pacific region, we need each other more than ever. We are seeing boundaries of trade expand in addition to traditional focus on market access and multilateralism. So that is why last November, during the Chorus Joint Committee held jointly by myself and Ambassador Tai in Seoul, we agreed, as Ambassador Tai introduced just minutes ago. In this vein, the Indo-Pacific economic framework that the US is currently developing as a new cooperation framework in the region serve as a good platform for our two countries to leverage our experience based on the successful Chorus, decade-long Chorus experience. We can work together, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder, as an ironclad Korea-US alliance that shares the same fundamental values of democracy, a market economy, and the rule of law. After all, as they say in Korea, a deep-rooted tree will not sway in the wind, but will blossom beautiful flowers and bear fruit plentifully. I'm fully convinced that our bilateral economic partnership, deeply rooted in Chorus FTA, and the journey we have come on, will weather any storm and help turn future crises into new opportunities for both of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister and Ambassador Tai, for those excellent remarks. This closes the opening session of today's program. So please join me in thanking again Ambassador Tai and Minister for their presence and for their remarks and for all the good work they're doing on behalf of the U.S.-Korea bilateral relationship. Thank you. We're going to allow some members of the press to join us, and we will then begin with the second session. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our next speaker, National Assembly Member Hak Young Lee. He is a member of the Democratic Party of Korea and represents Gunpo City in Gyeonggi Province, which he represented previously from 2012, 2013, and from 2016 to 2020. He was re-elected in May 2020. Since June of 2020, he has served as chairman of the National Assembly's Trade, Industry, Energy, SMEs, and Startups Committee, so very important to all of us here. He also serves as the executive director of the Noon Foundation, an organization dedicated to late South Korean President No's memory and continuation of his work. Please join me in welcoming Assembly Minister Hak Young Lee.
Good morning. Nice to meet you. 저는 한국 국회의원 이하경입니다. 현재 산업통상자원 중소벤처기업위원회 위원장을 맡고 있습니다. 세계 경제 외교나 통상을 수출할 수 있는 워싱턴 D.C.에서 한-미FTA 발효 10주년 행사에 참석하게 되어 매우 뜻깊게 생각하며 저를 초청해 주신 여러분들께 진심으로 감사의 뜻을 전합니다. 저는 이제까지 시민사회와 국회로 가며 한-미FTA에 직접 간접으로 관여해 왔습니다. 특히 산자위원장을 지내면서 한-미FTA로 인한 양국 무역과 투자의 긍정적 효과를 지켜보고 있습니다. 돌이켜보건대 한-미FTA 명함이 분명히 있겠지만 발효 후 10여 년간 경제적으로 양국 경제협력을 강화한 것은 분명한 사실로 보입니다. FTA로 인한 양국 간 보이지 않는 상호신뢰 증가는 삼성, LG, 현대 등 한국 주요 대기업들의 적극적 대미 투자 증가로 이어졌고, 이는 미국의 실업난 해소와 경제위기 극복에 기여하고 있습니다. 한국도 한-미FTA를 시작으로 시장 개방 계기를 마련하였고, 이후 EU, 중국, 많은 국가들과 차례로 FTA를 체결하며 글로벌 국가로서의 위상을 강화하였습니다. 미국 역시 반도체 장비, 백신 온부자재 등 분야에서 우리나라에 투자하며 한국 공급망을 강화하는 데 기여했습니다. 이는 양국 간 경제 안보 협력을 뒷받침하는 든든한 버팀목이 되고 있습니다. 그러나 현재 국제 통상 환경은 녹록치 않은 상황입니다. 코로나 변이 바이러스의 확산으로 미국은 세계대전 때보다 많은 사람을 잃었고, 전 세계적으로 백신, 히토류, 배터리 등 공급망 불안이 계속 확대되고 있습니다. 또한 디지털 사회의 가속화는 기존 아날로그 방식의 통상 규범의 한계를 보여주고 있습니다. 이러한 불안정성에 더해 최근 러시아의 우크라이나 침공으로 유가 등 원자재 가격은 폭등 조짐을 보이고 있습니다. 이러한 위기 속에서 지난 역사에서 보듯 한미 동맹은 위기에 더욱 강해진다고 생각합니다. 미국은 이에 상하원 의원을 중심으로 러시아 제재 법안을 발의하는 많은 노력을 하고 있으며, IPEF를 통한 인도 태평양 지역의 새로운 질서 마련도 추진하며 새로운 통상환경 변화 반응을 추진하고 있습니다. 한국도 최근 수출 통제의 뜻을 같이 하는 등 러시아 제재에 동참하고, 한-미FTA 10년의 경험을 바탕으로 IDF에서도 역할도 검토하고 있습니다. 저는 한-미-양국의 정부 그리고 연구기관이 이러한 새로운 통상질서 구축에 선도에 설 수 있다고 생각합니다. 디지털 전환, 공급망 이슈, 기후변화 등 신통상 이슈의 전환을 위해 한-미-양국의회, 정부 그리고 연구기관이 협력하여 양국 간 경제 협력을 더 강화하고, 그간 쌓아온 한-미-FTA 10여 년의 경험을 바탕으로 새로운 질서 구축을 선도해 나가야 할 것입니다. 오늘 한-미-FTA 발효 10주년을 기념하여 통상 분야의 전문가분들이 아태 지역을 위한 미래지향적이고 건설적인 논의를 하시게 된 것은 매우 의미 있는 일이라고 생각합니다. 한국 외에도 한-미-FTA 발전적 이행 그리고 새로운 통상질서 수립 등을 위해 미 의회와 정부 그리고 한국 정부와 더욱 힘을 합쳐 노력하겠습니다. 오늘 행사가 이러한 결의를 가지고 나아갈 방향을 제시하는 소중한 자리가 되기를 기원합니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you so much, Chairman Lee. Next up, it's a pleasure to introduce Congressman Ami Bera. Although he couldn't be here with us in person today, he's provided remarks to mark this momentous occasion in the U.S.-Korea relationship. As many of you know, Representative Bera serves as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, and Non-Proliferation, and is co-chair of the Congressional Korea Caucus and the Congressional Study Group on Korea. He is a tireless advocate for the U.S.-South Korea alliance, friendship, and last led a congressional delegation to South Korea in April 2019. Let's play the video.
Hi, I'm Congressman Ami Bera of California's 7th Congressional District and the co-chair of the Congressional Study Group on Korea. I'd like to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Korea Business Council, and the Korean Chamber of Commerce and Industry for allowing me to say a few words in recognition of the 10-year anniversary of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. You know, as two countries that are so closely aligned in our values of free markets, of opportunity, of the rule of law, the Free Trade Agreement makes a lot of sense. You know, the more our economies are trading together, the more we benefit not just the Korean economy and the U.S. economy, but also the countries in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as the entire world. It's remarkable to see the growth in Korea's economy going from one of the poorest countries in the world 40 years ago but through the tremendous hard work of the Korean people, as well as the relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea, Korea is now one of the most dynamic, innovative economies in the world. In fact, my last visit to Korea last year, we sought that innovation and dynamism as we visited with various industries. I hope that soon we will pass a version of the America Competes Act, which has the CHIPS Act in it, which will continue to encourage Korean investment in the United States, certainly in an area of the semiconductor industry, but also will further integrate our two global economies to continue to be innovative, to be world leaders, and to solve the issues and challenges that we will face in the 21st century. So again, on this 10th anniversary of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, I'd like to say to our partners in the Republic of Korea, as well as in the business community in both countries, let's continue to work together. Let's build a peaceful and prosperous 21st century, both in the Indo-Pacific, but also across the world. Here's to our partnership. Be well, be safe, and let's be kind to one another. Hi, I'm Congressman Ami Rivera of California.
Thank you, Congressman Amidero and Honorable Chairman Lee Ha-kyung for kind and energetic comments and insights. Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy of Korea prepared a video clip to celebrate this meaningful event. It is my pleasure to introduce to you. The video encompasses the past, present, and the future of KOROS. It sheds light on our efforts to expand bilateral trade and investment ties and create new economic opportunities for people in both countries for the last decade. Also, it charts the course of our long-held alliance. I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
Tonight, yes. Tonight? I'm coming to Thursday. Okay. Are you free?
while we wait for the video to play, which should happen momentarily, just want to note a couple things about the U.S. Chamber and the U.S. Korea Business Council. The U.S. Chamber serves over 25 different markets with bilateral, and has bilateral business councils with many of them. And the U.S. Korea Business Council is one of our strongest and most effective councils in my opinion. The U.S. Korea Business Council represents the interests of many U.S. companies with ties to Korea, both as investors and as exporters. And increasingly, the relationship between the two countries is based on kind of really comparative advantage, where there's genuine synergy between the two business communities. So we really, in the year ahead, in the years ahead, we really want to encourage greater exchanges between business communities in both countries, so that we can achieve even greater synergies, because they are out there. Many of our service providers are very strong in Korea. There's room to grow. So thank you very much. I think we're ready to go.
Chorus FTA, the Korea-U.S. bilateral partnership, dates back to 1953, and 10 years ago, Korea and the U.S. formed a new alliance for economic co-prosperity. On February 2nd, 2006, Washington State Time, former Korean Trade Minister Kim Hyun-jong and former U.S. Trade Representative Rob Portman declared the official launch of FTA negotiations between the two countries at the U.S. Capitol. The two countries identified 19 areas for negotiations, which was followed by 8 formal rounds of negotiations that took place over a 1-year period. And through tough, intensive 8 rounds of negotiations, both countries reached an agreement to conclude the FTA negotiations on June 30th, 2007. But that was not the end of the story. The two sides had to go through the pain of renegotiations of the FTA afterwards. Under the Obama-Myung-Bak Lee administrations, further negotiations were made to modify automobile and agricultural provisions.
In fact, it's estimated that today's deal alone will increase American economic output by more than our last 9 free trade agreements combined. This deal is also a win for our ally and friend South Korea.
It took 5 years before being ratified by both the U.S. Congress and Korea's National Assembly, and it was finally entered into force on March 15, 2012. Since then, Korea and U.S. business communities have enjoyed stable bilateral trade and investment despite increasing volatility in the global trading environment. The Korea-U.S. Trade Ministerial Meeting and 6th Joint Committee meeting were held in Seoul on November 19, 2021, marking the first visit to South Korea by the USTR in 11 years. In commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the Chorus FTA, both sides also committed to ensuring that the agreement continues to play a vital role in strengthening the steadfast alliance between the U.S. and Korea. 10 years after entry into force of the Chorus FTA, bilateral trade has expanded around 70%, while Korean investment in the U.S. has increased around 3-fold. At the same time, U.S. investment in Korea has doubled compared to the pre-FTA period. Exports of U.S. beef and U.S. automobiles to Korea have increased, and Korean mobile devices and home appliances have also been favored by American consumers. Beyond the economic sphere, the Chorus FTA brought the peoples of the two countries closer to each other through cultural exchanges. The Moon-Biden Summit, held in May 2021, served as a good opportunity to expand the military alliance between the two countries into economic, technological, and supply chain alliance. At a Korea-U.S. Business Roundtable held on May 21st, 2021, major South Korean corporations announced plans to invest around $39.4 billion in the United States. U.S. companies, including semiconductor equipment manufacturers and raw material providers for vaccines, are also investing in Korea, contributing to strengthening Korea's supply chain and enhancing industrial competitiveness. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to an acute shortage of essential supplies, including vaccines. By exposing vulnerabilities in global supply chains, the crisis has underscored the importance of the global supply chain's resilience. Korea and the U.S. agreed on a global vaccine partnership last May, and the U.S. mRNA vaccine is being produced in Korea. Semiconductor shortages have led to disruptions in automobile production lines, while climate change and carbon neutrality have emerged as critical trade issues. Amid these changes in the trade environment, the U.S. is working to strengthen its relationships with countries in the Indo-Pacific region, the strategic importance of which continues to grow. Korea and the U.S. will reinforce collaboration in new trade issues, such as supply chain resilience, new technologies, digital economy, climate change, and vaccine distributions in the Indo-Pacific region. Our two countries will fully leverage the 10-year-old porous FTA to establish a new order in the Indo-Pacific region for its more peaceful and prosperous future.